They tried to steal my $260,000 home with $4,800 in fake violations while I was at my mother's bedside, watching her fade away. But everything changed the moment I stood up at their packed emergency meeting, pulled out my federal judge badge, and watched their entire scheme collapse like a house of cards. Picture this: 47 angry neighbors jammed into our stuffy community center, local news cameras rolling, and the corrupt HOA president screaming at me to shut up and pay your fines. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, crackling like tension in the air, as I slowly reached into my purse. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Federal Judge Victoria Hale. The room went dead silent. What I've witnessed here tonight constitutes multiple federal crimes. Her face drained of color. Even the deputy, her own cousin, stepped 3 paces away from her. Game over. But let me back up. What would you do if vultures tried to steal your house during the darkest moment of your life? My name is Victoria Hale. I've served as a federal judge for 20. But 3 years ago, I was bone-deep tired of being your honor. I craved peace. So when I bought my modest ranch in Oak Ridge Meadows, I told no one about my job. It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, 180 homes built in the 90s, valued between $260,000 and $300,000. HOA. Fees were just $95 for landscaping and pool upkeep. Most neighbors were retirees or young families, and nobody asked questions. For almost 3 years, I loved being just Victoria, the woman who waved from her driveway and complained about Netflix prices. Then came last spring. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I took 6 months of leave, hired the HOA-approved lawn service, forwarded my mail, and spent every day 200 miles away, holding her hand in a hospice room that reeked of disinfectant and broken dreams. The day after her funeral, I returned home still in my black dress, still tasting salt from my tears. My front door was buried under certified mail. Inside, the house smelled musty, like it had been abandoned. Sympathy flowers were wilted and brown. And then I saw it. A thick envelope stamped final notice. $2,400 in violations. My hand shook as I flipped through the so-called infractions. 12. Lawn violations at $50 each, though my grass had been cut weekly by their approved contractor. 6. Mailbox violations at $75 each, though my forest green mailbox matched nearly every other one on the street, and the big one, $900 for unauthorized. Landscaping modifications. They claimed I had removed a rose bush without permission, even though I had email approval and screenshots saved, and every single violation was dated during the weeks I was sitting at my mother's bedside, surrounded by hospice staff who could confirm it. The notice was signed by Karen Whitmore, HOA president. I had 10 days to pay our face foreclosure. 10 days, I spent 3 of them trapped in voicemail hell. Atch! Chasing Karen. When I finally cornered her, her voice was like ice water. Violations are violations, Mrs. Hale. Grief isn't an excuse for property neglect. Perhaps you'd be happier in a senior community with less responsibility. That fake sweetness made my skin crawl. I'd heard that same condescending tone from hundreds of defendants who thought they were smarter than the law, but my training kicked in. I started investigating. Evening walks revealed 3 for sale signs on homes with recent violation letters. Records showed they all sold to KCS Holdings $40,000 below market value, and KCS traced straight back to Whitmore Construction. Same last name as Karen? Coincidence?
Not a chance.
The violations themselves were the smoking gun. Every letter had the same strange formatting, errors, identical spacing after periods. Same computer, same author, same scam. Then I saw Karen S. white Lexus parked outside Evelyn Brooks's home, 3 doors down. Evelyn, 80, 4 years old recently. Widowed, stood inside, clutching her own violation letter, tears streaming down her face. They weren't just targeting me. This was a business model. I was about to show them what happens when you target a federal judge's community. Karen struck fast. 48 hours later, I found an emergency HOA meeting notice shoved in my mailbox. Their bylaws required 7 days notice. But rules didn't apply to Karen. The topic: violations threatening community property values. Translation: they were about to make me a public example. That Monday, I expected a dozen people. Instead, nearly 50 terrified residents sat scattered in our overheated community center. The AC was broken. The room stank of burnt coffee and fear. Fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps overhead. Karen commanded the front table like a dictator navy blazer, perfect blonde bob, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Beside her sat her 21-year-old nephew Ryan. Nodding like a paid puppet, she launched into a presentation with middle school quality PowerPoint slides. My lawn, my mailbox, my garden. Our certified inspector, she gestured to Ryan, documented. Violations exceeding standards. I stood, 3-ring binder in hand. May I respond to these accusations? This isn't a courtroom, Mrs. Hale. It's a board meeting. And why am I being tried without defense? The binder hit the table with a satisfying thud. Here's written approval for the rosebush removal. Here are lawn service receipts. Here are photos proving my grass height matches my neighbor's. Karen didn't even glance at them. These could easily be fabricated. Had just accused me of fraud. In 18 years on the bench, no one had ever dared question my integrity so casually. Are you calling me a liar? I demanded. I'm saying desperate people fabricate evidence. She turned to the room, her voice dripping authority. The board has already filed preliminary lien paperwork. My stomach dropped. No notice, no process, pure violation of their own bylaws. That's when my instincts took over. I pulled out my phone and started recording. For the record, I said loudly, you are proceeding with liens based on fabricated violations, ignoring written approvals and contractor receipts, and filing without proper notice. Karen S. Confident smile cracked. You can't record this meeting. Actually, I can. This is a public meeting concerning my property. And single-party consent recording is legal in this state. I held my phone high so everyone saw the red recording. ... The room shifted. Residents straightened. Evelyn wiped her tears. Karen rushed to vote. Motion carries. 2 hours to settle violations. But her authority was gone. As people filed out, whispers followed me instead of her. She's right about the timing. Smart to record? Maybe we should start documenting too. Then Mark Dawson, a veteran, approached me quietly. Ma'am, I've tracked these violations for months. Same pattern, same buyer. 15 families forced out. Me a folded sheet. I opened it in my car, a handwritten list of addresses, violation dates, sale prices. All sold to KCS Holdings. All below market. Karen wasn't running an HOA. She was running a real estate scam. The lien wasn't her victory, it was her confession. She had just handed me the evidence I needed to bring her entire operation down. The hunter had just become the hunted, and she knew it. The next morning, it's exactly 7 a.m., her white Lexus crunched into my driveway. She stepped out in razor-press khakis and a polo worth more than most people's grocery bill. Ryan followed behind, holding a camera and a ruler, looking miserable. Good morning. Mrs. Hale, Karen chirped with fake cheer. Time for our routine property wellness check. Through my bedroom window, I watched as they measured my grass with a plastic ruler. They were desperate. They didn't realize they had already lost. Even my garden gnome's height was on her violation list. The performance was so absurd it would have been comedy gold if it wasn't designed to terrorize me into submission. This became my daily 7 a.m. alarm. Karen's wellness checks, each one more ridiculous than the last. She snapped photos of imaginary paint chips, counted non-existent Christmas decorations in September, and even documented my car's parking angle, like she was investigating a crime scene. But the real attack began when my services suddenly vanished. Wednesday. Sorry, Mrs. Hale, we're terminating your lawn contract. Henderson's had served our neighborhood for years. Why? I asked. We heard you're litigious and behind on fees. We can't afford the liability. Thursday, my pool access card stopped working. System glitch, they said. Strangely, it only affected me. Friday, my mailbox key failed. Security upgrades, the HOA claimed. We forgot to notify you. By Saturday, I realized Karen was cutting me off from every community service, isolating me like some suburban exile. Time for a counterstrike. On Monday, I spent my lunch break at the county courthouse. The records department smelled of old paper and broken dreams, but those files contained dynamite. For hours of digging revealed the truth. 23 homes. It's been forced into below-market sales after harassment campaigns. Everyone purchased by shell companies tied directly to Whitmore Construction. Average loss per family, $47,000. Takeaway, always. Research recent sales in your HOA. Patterns of below market. Deals often expose organized theft targeting vulnerable families. But the real bombshell came from the budget documents. Last year, violation fees brought in $180,000 from just 180 homes. Actual improvements completed? About $23,000. The missing $157,000? Paid to consultants, specifically KCS Consulting, short for Whitmore Construction Services. Then came the smoking gun. Buried in county archives, I found the original 2294 HOA covenant. It looked nothing like Karen's current bylaws. The true governing rules required homeowner votes for any changes. I found no record of any votes ever. That meant every violation letter, every fine, every lien had no legal standing. The mini twist came as I left the courthouse. In the stairwell of the parking garage, I heard Karen's unmistakable voice, crystal clear. We need to accelerate. The timeline on Hale. She's asking too many questions. File the foreclosure paperwork tomorrow. I don't care if it's early. The buyer's financing expires next month, and that corner lot is worth double what we'll pay. Another voice nervous. But what if she lawyers up? Karen snapped. Back. Then we make her life miserable until she gives up. Worked on 15 other families. One widow won't break our system. I recorded every word, my hands shaking with fury. That evening, I met Margaret Morgan, a mother battling her own. 3,200 violations sieged this time for too many toys in her yard. She introduced me to her attorney, Daniel Rodriguez, who had been tracking similar cases across 3 counties. It's bigger than just our neighborhood, Margaret whispered, bouncing her toddler. Rodriguez says they've stolen over $2 million in home equity. But Victoria, be careful. Karen has friends in city planning. This could get dangerous. Dangerous. After hearing them plot my foreclosure while I was still in morning clothes, dangerous sounded like exactly what I needed. That night, I spread Mark Dawson's handwritten victim list across my kitchen table. Alongside courthouse documents and the recording of Karen S. threats, 6 years of systematic theft, targeting families during illness, divorce, job loss, even death. The most vulnerable moments of human life. And what made me smile in the darkness was a simple realization. Karen thought she was crushing some helpless widow instead. She had declared war on a federal judge with 20 of experience dismantling criminal enterprises far more sophisticated than her suburban scam. Game on, Karen. Game on. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Oak Ridge. Legal services. It sounded official until I realized it was just her brother-in-law's strip mall office. The demand, out of $4,800 in violations, plus $2,200 in administrative costs, a total of $7,000. Pay in 5 days or face foreclosure. But Karen got sloppy. The letter claimed I had waived my right to appeal by skipping mandatory mediation sessions. Problem was, no mediation had ever been scheduled. They were fabricating compliance to push foreclosure. The so-called evidence was laughable. An affidavit claiming I was hostile and threatening during inspections, photos of damage. To my lawn brown spots supposedly from dog urine, I don't even own a dog. Certified mail receipts proving I refused notices dated during the week I was holding my mother's hand in hospice. This wasn't just corruption, it was cruelty. Time for the counterpunch. I called Margaret, who connected me with Rodriguez. His office looked like an FBI case room file stacked high. Whiteboards covered in maps, coffee-stained legal pads everywhere. Double quotes, Mrs. Hale. He said, leaning back in his squeaky chair, "You're not going to believe this. You're the 7th Oak Ridge resident I've represented this year. Same tactics, same outcome. Forced sales to the same buyer." He pulled out a thick folder marked Whitmore Enterprise. Inside were records of 15 below-market acquisitions in just 3 years, with average profits of $62,000 per home. They've been running this scam across 4 counties, preying on families in crisis, he explained, spreading photos of addresses, violation letters, and sale prices across the table, but they'd grown lazy. Same violation language, same formatting errors, even the same witness signatures. Ryan, Karen's nephew, had been inspecting homes he'd never visited. Then Rodriguez dropped the bombshell. City planning records show pre-applications for permits on your corner lot with the empty lot she already owns. Karen's assembling property for a duplex project worth over $300,000 in profit. That's why she's targeting you. Takeaway: always check city planning records near your home. Development projects often reveal the real motive behind HOA harassment. Finally, Rodriguez asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Mrs. Hale, what's your background? Your legal instincts aren't normal for most homeowners." For 3 months, I'd kept my identity hidden, determined to fight as an ordinary resident. But staring at those files families destroyed, millions stolen, I knew the time for secrecy was over. "Daniel, what I'm about to say stays between us. Of course, I'm a federal judge, U.S. District Court, Northern District. 18 years. His coffee mug froze midair. You're a judge?" "Yes. And what Karen doesn't know is that she's been violating federal fair housing laws, fraud statutes, and racketeering laws. This isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. It's a federal case." The color drained from his face. "Hale, with your authority, we can destroy her." "I want to try the democratic process first," I said. "Give her the chance to resign quietly, make restitution. But when she refuses them, she will refuse. The whole community will see her fall before I drop the federal hammer." That evening, I sat in my car outside Karen's insurance office, watching her through the glass as she worked late. She had no idea that 18 years of federal experience was about to crash down on her empire. She thought she was hunting weak prey. Tomorrow, she'd learn exactly what kind of predator she'd chosen to target. The next morning, I did what any good judge does when facing organized crime. I went back to the source documents. Criminals always forget exist. At 8 a.m., Mark Dawson met me at the courthouse steps, clutching a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. "Jajo. Mrs. Hale, I've been thinking about those original incorporation papers you mentioned." "Smart man." Straight into the dusty basement archive, the kind of place county clerks keep records they pray no one ever bothers to find. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and decades of bureaucratic neglect. But buried in those forgotten filing cabinets was pure legal dynamite. The 2,294 articles of incorporation for Meadowbrook Meadows HOA contained something I'd never seen in any modern HOA document: a homeowner's bill of rights. The original charter demanded annual financial audits, complete open book policies. And here's the stunning part: automatic dissolution of board authority if financial irregularities ever exceeded 10% of the annual budget. 10%. Karen's operation had stolen over 60%. But the real nuclear bomb was buried in Section 12, Emergency Governance Intervention. It was a built-in failsafe designed specifically for corruption. Any organized misconduct could trigger immediate suspension of board authority, pending full investigation. Legal takeaway: original HOA incorporation documents always supersede later amendments, and they often hide powerful protections that corrupt boards hope you'll never uncover. Tom gave a low whistle as he leaned over my shoulder. "Judge, this is like finding the Constitution in your attic." The financial records told an even darker story. Public filings showed Karen's board had violated those incorporation requirements for years in a row. No annual audits, no transparent budgets, no homeowner access to records. In that time, she had collected $389,000 in violation fees since becoming president, yet only $23,000 had gone to legitimate community improvements. The missing $366,000 had simply disappeared into a maze of Whitmore family businesses, like water draining into sand. But then came the true power shift moment. Tucked inside the original folder was a handwritten note, forgotten by some county clerk decades ago. It spelled everything out. Emergency intervention clause activated by petition of 25% of homeowners, plus documented evidence of systematic financial misconduct. Board authority suspended immediately, pending state investigation. That meant only 45 signatures from our 180 homes. I already had 37 commitments from families Tom and I had quietly contacted during the past week. The math was simple. The law was clear. Evidence was overwhelming. With one petition filing, Karen's entire criminal empire could collapse overnight. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, clutching those original documents. The weight of absolute legal authority settled over me like a familiar judge's robe. For months, I had played the role of helpless victim, letting Karen believe she held all the power. But the law doesn't bend for HOA bylaws. Federal statutes don't kneel to clipboard tyrants. And 20 years of judicial experience will always outweigh 6 years of petty real estate fraud. The irony was brutal. From day one, Karen had operated illegally. Every violation letter, every fine, every threat issued under an authority she never truly had. I pulled out my phone and called Rodriguez. "Daniel, it's Victoria. I found the key to the kingdom, the Emergency Governance Intervention Clause. We can dissolve her board immediately." His voice sharpened. "Are you serious? Dead serious? And Daniel, I'm done playing defense. Lent's time Karen learns what happens when you target a federal judge's community. The war was nearly a date over. But first, I wanted her to dig her hole just a little deeper. My dining room transformed overnight into a war room. Timelines of Karen-esque crimes stretched across the walls. Color-coded maps marked the homes she targeted. Evidence folders, financial, records, and procedural violations were stacked neatly in rows. It looked like the FBI had set up shop in my house. Monday evening, the War Council assembled. Me,
Margaret Morgan,
the accountant. Mark Dawson, with his veteran network. Daniel Rodriguez, armed with legal firepower. Sarah Kim, a young mother whose husband worked in city planning. "All right. Team," I said, pointing to our evidence wall like a prosecutor before a jury. "Here's how we're going to take down a criminal empire." Rodriguez pulled out a stack of legal documents thick enough to stop a bullet. Phase 1. We need 45 homeowner signatures. That's 25%. We have 37 confirmed, 8 more identified as sympathetic. Margaret, spreadsheets in hand, detailed the losses. Karen has stolen $2.1 million total. That's an average of $47,000 per household. It's where we can prove she targeted families based on vulnerability and property values. Legal takeaway. Homeowners do have constitutional rights to remove corrupt HOA boards, but you need exact percentages and airtight documentation to trigger oversight intervention. Tom, our intelligence chief, reported his findings. Karen's city connections, surface level only. Her husband's construction company has multiple permit violations. Her brother-in-law's law practice is under ethics review. The whole network is cracking. Then Sarah dropped the tactical bomb. Rocking her toddler in one arm, she said, "My husband found records that Karen applied for permits on Victoria's corner lot 6 months ago. Her duplex project is already approved pending property acquisition. She's been planning this theft since before Victoria's mother got sick." The room went dead silent. This wasn't random harassment. This was premeditated financial assassination. Leaned forward, Rodriguez files formal complaints with the State Oversight Board, citing systematic misconduct. "We're not asking for an investigation. We're demanding immediate intervention." Rodriguez nodded. "I'll have it filed tomorrow." With this documentation, they'll have no choice but to act fast. Phase 3, Margaret continued. We present the evidence at the next HOA meeting. Full transparency. Witnesses. Records. We'll give Karen one chance to resign and make restitution. And when she refuses? Sarah asked softly. I smiled, the kind of smile that tastes like justice. Phase 4, emergency intervention. Her board is suspended. State oversight takes control, and a federal investigation begins. Tom raised his hand in Phase 5. Phase 5, I said, is me using federal authority to end her criminal enterprise permanently. But first, the community will see every step of her downfall. For the next 2 hours, we prepared the most comprehensive HOA corruption case in state history. Evidence packets for all 180 homeowners. Media outreach lists, recording equipment for the public meeting, legal injunctions to block retaliation. Sarah's husband provided city planning documents to expose Karen's development timeline. Margaret created easy tour charts showing where the stolen money went. Tom lined up witness testimonies from 15 families forced to sell. I practiced my presentation until I could deliver it from memory, step by step, building from petty HOA violations to full-blown federal crimes. By the end, Karen's guilt would be undeniable. Remember, I told the team, she still thinks I'm a widow who will eventually give up. She has no idea what's coming. Rodriguez grinned, tucking away his files. Judge, in 20 years, I've never seen a case this airtighter. A defendant this overconfident. Margaret hugged us all, whispering, my kids will finally grow up in a neighborhood where bullies don't win. As they left, I stood in my transformed dining room surrounded by 6 years of evidence. Tomorrow, Karen would meet her match. But she must have sensed the shift, because her desperation turned psychotic Thursday morning. I found troublemakers spray-painted across my mailbox in dripping red letters, like something out of a horror film. The smell of paint mixed with dew made my stomach churn. Friday night, all 4 of my car tires were slashed. Saturday, anonymous letters appeared in team members' mailboxes. Drop your campaign or face consequences. We know we're your children. Go to school. The threats were childish, but disturbing, especially since they targeted Sarah's toddler. Sunday evening, Karen escalated again. She filed a false police report claiming I had threatened violence at HOA meetings. Her deputy cousin eagerly took her statement. No questions asked. What she didn't know was that I had installed security cameras after the first vandalism. Every attack, every late-night prowler, every whispered conversation with her nephew, all captured in high definition. But the real revelation came when Tom spread fresh bank records across my table. Judge Whitmore construction is collapsing. 3 projects stalled, permits denied, foreclosure looming. Karen's business is circling the drain, and suddenly, everything made sense. Karen wasn't just greedy, she was desperate. HOA's funds were her last lifeline, and my corner lot, the final piece she needed to save her crumbling empire. How much are we talking about? I asked. Conservative estimate? $300,000 profit from your forced sale and her development project. Without it, they lose everything. Desperation makes criminals sloppy and reckless. Karen proved that when Margaret Morgan got a phone call that chilled me to the core. Victoria, you need to hear this recording. Margaret whispered as she arrived at my house at 11 p.m. with her laptop. Karen called me tonight, thinking I'd switched sides. I hit record the second I recognized her voice. The audio was crystal clear. Margaret, you seem like a smart woman with young children to protect. Maybe you should reconsider supporting Victoria's campaign. Accidents happen in neighborhoods. Kids play outside unsupervised. I'd hate for anything unfortunate to occur. My judicial blood ran ice cold. Threatening children crossed the line from petty harassment into criminal territory. But Karen's recklessness also gave us the perfect trap. By Monday morning, she called an emergency board meeting to vote on a $500 special. Assessments, supposedly for urgent infrastructure repairs. In reality, it was her last-ditch attempt to drain HOA funds before we froze the accounts. Classic Karen tactics. Only 24 hours notice, scheduled during work hours so most residents couldn't attend. But this time, she was walking into our ambush. Rodriguez filed restraining orders that same afternoon. I documented every threat, every act of vandalism, every intimidation attempt with precision. Our security cameras captured Karen's nephew spray painting threats on Margaret's driveway, while Karen waited in her Lexus, engine running like a getaway car. Legal takeaway: security cameras on your property can record adjacent areas, and their footage can be admissible in both civil and criminal cases. But the turning point came from someone. Unexpected Evelyn Brooks, the elderly widow Karen had been using as a spy, showed up at my door Wednesday evening. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched a manila envelope. "Victoria, I can't do this anymore. Can't watch her destroy good families." Inside the envelope were dozens of forged violation reports signed with Evelyn's name. She paid me $5,000 to spy on neighbors and sign whatever she wanted. I was scared and broke after my husband died, but this is wrong. The evidence was devastating. Evelyn had unknowingly signed reports for violations she'd never witnessed, inspections she'd never conducted, and meetings she'd never attended. "I'll testify," she whispered. "I'll tell everyone what she made me do." That night, I realized Karen had lost her last ally. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't be her financial salvation, it would be her public downfall. When Karen arrived at the emergency meeting, she came like a general marching to war. She brought her cousin, a sheriff's deputy, who kept nervously touching his badge. She announced to a packed community center that I was about to be arrested for stalking, harassment, and conspiracy. The room buzzed with shocked whispers. Nearly 50 residents crammed into chairs meant for 30. The broken air conditioning left the place hot, tense, and electric. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen declared theatrically, "we are here tonight because one individual has been systematically terrorizing your board members. Officer Whitmore has the evidence." The deputy shifted uneasily as Karen handed him a folder full of fabricated documents, photos of me on Wit, public sidewalks labeled as trespassing, spliced audio made to sound threatening, and sworn statements from her own relatives. The deputy reluctantly announced he was prepared to issue citations for harassment and trespassing. I sat calmly in the back, like a judge reviewing routine motions, while Rodriguez organized boxes of real evidence. Margaret streamed the meeting live to our neighborhood Facebook group, viewers climbing into the hundreds. Mark Dawson stood ready near the Channel 7 news reporter. I'd invited corruption stories were their bread and butter. Then came the moment that made my heart sing. Evelyn Brooks stood in the front row, confession trembling in her frail hands. "Karen, stop this nonsense. I can't watch you lie anymore." Karen's face faltered. "Evelyn, you're confused. Sit down." "I am not confused," Evelyn said, her voice clear and strong. "I signed those fake violation reports because you promised me money and threatened to put a lien on my house. But I won't stay silent any longer." The room erupted in shock. The deputy instinctively stepped away from Karen, realizing the truth. "She's senile," Karen shrieked. "She doesn't know what she's saying." But Evelyn kept reading, detailing 5 years of systematic fraud in her shaky handwriting, her memory sharp and undeniable. The deputy's face turned pale as he realized this wasn't HOA business anymore, it was felony fraud. And his name was about to be dragged into it. "Karen," he whispered, "maybe we should arrest you." That's when Karen lost control. She organized this. Karen screamed, pointing at me. "She brainwashed Evelyn. She's the criminal." I stood slowly, walked to the microphone, and faced the Channel 7 camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, before I respond, I think you deserve to know exactly who has been targeted by this criminal scheme." The room fell silent. "My name is Victoria Hale. I am a United States District Court judge." Alasa held up my credentials badge, glinting under the harsh lights. The silence was so sharp, you could hear the hum of the fluorescent bulbs. "For 20. I have prosecuted conspiracies like this one. What you've witnessed tonight is systematic racketeering, fraud, and violations of civil rights under color of law." Karen's cousin took several steps back, suddenly realizing his career was at risk. "Officer Whitmore," I said firmly, "the evidence you just presented is fabricated, designed to obstruct justice. I suggest you distance yourself immediately. His hand moved to his radio. Dispatch. I need detectives at the Oak Ridge Community Center. Possible federal crimes in progress. Karen collapsed into her chair, pale and trembling, finally realizing the predator she thought she was hunting had just revealed its teeth. The room erupted in gasps, shouts, and applause. Channel 7's camera captured every second the judge's badge. The neighbors' cheers, Karen's slaps, but Karen wasn't finished. "You can't do this," she screamed, lunging for the microphone. "This is entrapment, abuse of power." Own cousin blocked her hand on his weapon. "Ma'am, step back. You're making this worse." I remained calm, addressing the room with courtroom authority. When a federal judge witnesses ongoing criminal activity, they have not only the right, but the obligation to report it to the proper authorities. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized decades ago. FBI Field Office. "This is Judge Victoria Hale. I am witnessing systematic federal crimes at the Oak Ridge Community Center. I need agents dispatched immediately." The words FBI Field Office hit the room like a thunderclap. Some neighbors cried tears of relief. Others hugged strangers. Mark Dawson even saluted me, and for the first time Karen realized there was no escape. She grabbed the microphone stand, screaming at the top of her lungs. "She's lying. Federal judges can't investigate private citizens. This is a setup, a conspiracy. She's not even a real judge." The Channel 7 reporter stepped forward, camera rolling. "Your Honor, can you comment on the scope of this investigation?" I turned to face the cameras, my voice steady with the weight of judgment. "What you've witnessed tonight is a 6-year criminal conspiracy involving mail fraud, wire fraud, racketeering, and civil rights violations. This HOA was nothing more than a front for systematic theft, targeting vulnerable families at their weakest moments." Then I turned directly to Karen. "Mrs. Whitmore, you preyed on grieving families. You stole homes from people drowning in medical debt. You threatened children to silence their parents. You abused HOA authority because you thought your victims were too scared or too poor to fight back." Karen tried to run for the exit, but a deputy stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, you'll need to stay until the FBI arrives. I want a lawyer," she shouted. "I want my lawyer right now." "You'll need a very good one," I replied calmly, "because federal RICO charges carry mandatory prison time." Legal takeaway: federal RICO laws apply when local corruption involves fraud and conspiracy, turning HOA harassment into serious federal felonies punishable by decades behind bars. The FBI arrived 18 minutes later in black SUVs. Their presence enough to make the entire room stand straighter. Special Agent Maria Santos, a colleague I'd worked with for years, stepped in with calm authority. "Judge Hale," she said respectfully, "we've been monitoring this case since your first call. We're ready to proceed." Within minutes, Karen, her nephew Ryan, and her brother-in-law were handcuffed. The sight of federal agents reading Miranda rights to HOA board members was so surreal that neighbors pulled out their phones to record. But the most powerful moment came when Agent Santos addressed the community. "Ladies and gentlemen, what Judge Hale uncovered represents the largest residential fraud scheme in this district's history. Over $2 million in stolen home equity. 23 families forced into distress sales and systematic violations of federal fair housing laws." The crowd's reaction was part celebration, part shock, and part pure vindication. As Karen was led away, she turned back to me, her eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over." Made local news highlights for months. Mrs. Whitmore, in 20 on the federal bench, "I've learned that criminals always think they're smarter than the law. You spent 6 years stealing from families during their darkest moments. Now you'll spend the next 8 to 12 years learning that federal prison doesn't care about your HOA authority." The community center erupted in applause louder than any verdict I'd ever delivered. Justice wasn't just served, it was celebrated and broadcast for the world to see. 6 months later, I sat in my garden, in the very spot Karen once planned. Her illegal duplex watching kids play in the community pool now open to everyone. The morning air smelled of fresh coffee and victory. The legal resolution was swift and crushing. Karen pleaded guilty to 23 federal charges, including racketeering, mail fraud, and civil rights violations. She received 8 years in prison, no parole. Ryan got 3 years for conspiracy and forgery. Her brother-in-law, Despard, got 5 years for running a fraudulent legal practice. But the financial justice was even sweeter. The court ordered full restitution to $0.1 million returned to homeowners. My own settlement was $47,000 plus attorney fees, enough to launch the scholarship fund I had dreamed about. The HOA's frozen accounts released another $180,000 back into the community. Fraudulent properties were auctioned off. Families recovered an average of $63,000 each. Property values in Oak Ridge jumped 12% once the story went national. Buyers loved the idea of a neighborhood where corruption was crushed publicly. The transformation has been extraordinary. Our new HOA board, elected with record participation, cut fees to $35 and made finances fully transparent. I now serve as unpaid constitutional advisor, ensuring we never face board tyranny again. Neighbors stepped into leadership. Margaret Morgan won a city council seat fighting for homeowners. Mark Dawson turned our common areas into spaces for veterans outreach. Sarah Kim organized family support networks. Evelyn Brooks, our star witness, now serves as treasurer, with full access to every financial record. The ripple effects spread beyond our town. I testified before the state Senate on HOA reform. The FBI formed an HOA fraud task force inspired by our case. Law schools began teaching it as a study in citizen empowerment, but the personal healing mattered most. The scholarship fund in my mother's memory now supports students pursuing public service. We planted the Judge Victoria Hale Memorial Garden where Karen's illegal project was once planned. Our new Justice Day festival celebrates unity and transparency. Neighbors who once lived in fear now host potlucks, organize kids' activities, and build support systems for families in crisis. Together, we prove that communities can defeat predators with courage, documentation, and strategy. The media attention has been overwhelming, but purposeful. The documentary David vs. HOA Goliath won awards. My YouTube interview reached millions. Every week, victims from across the country email me their stories. I connect them to resources and remind them, one person with documentation and determination can change everything. But what makes me smile most is simple: walking through our thriving neighborhood. Hearing children laugh, seeing neighbors celebrate, knowing bullies didn't win here. Sometimes I stop at that forest green mailbox, the one that started this warrant here, my mother's final words in my heart. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Justice requires patience, strategy, and courage. But it always requires ordinary people refusing to surrender. So here's my challenge to you. Have you survived an HOA nightmare? Share your story in the comments. Let's build a community where no neighbor fights alone. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary justice. Because after 20 on the bench and 6 months in this fight, I've learned one truth. You have more power than you think. You've been watching HOA Karens get a reality check. If this story gave you satisfaction or even secondhand rage hit, leave a comment and subscribe for more weekly HOA chaos.